Chapter 3. The Magic of the Word. I found him, the man who was not, many months later. That day, in order to meet him finally, I had to use again a dangerous technique of working with time and space. I use it extremely rarely, in critical situations, that is, when failure to achieve a result threatens with disaster. I can't explain what happens in such case, even in terms of another reality. A huge distance is covered in just a few minutes. Usually, while moving in space, I close my eyes and look at my watch only upon arrival. We met. I did not want to tell him why, but I said that there was nothing to lose. He was coolly surprised. I was afraid that I would never see him again. "Are you crazy?" he asked without any emotion. I was not surprised by his reaction. Of course, many people take me for crazy. For some reason, people tend not to believe you when you tell the truth, and, conversely, to believe you when you deceive them. "No," I answered calmly and not at all offended by his assumption. "So who are you?" The answer to this question, no matter how strange it may seem from the outside, interested me much more than, perhaps, it interested him. I did not know what to answer, so I recited a few of my poems. "I see, a spellcaster," he said, thinking about something, and suggested visiting a haunted basement in the center of the city, where a lot of different people used to gather to cast spells. I said, I did not want to go to the place with a lot of different people, because I had little interest in people, but he replied that witches sometimes needed to materialize and ground themselves. I promised to think about it, and we said goodbye. I had an official reason not to go, being already invited to cast spells in the district library, but even if I had had 100 reasons, or not reasons, but a real cause, I knew in advance that I would have definitely gone with him to that basement. I did not answer yes right away, since I wanted him to write or call me, so we corresponded for the second day. I lived by his messages, as if each of them prolonged my life. Flirting with the man who was not, I jokingly accused him of giving me at our last date someone else's magic wand, which I successfully gave back to him. I complained that, despite my requests, he had never sent his photo to me, apparently, being afraid of a love spell. I said to have finally understood why the next meeting was scheduled for the date on which, according to the old calendar, exorcists cast out demons. In conclusion, I wrote, it was a pity that he saw me only as a spellcaster, and I secretly hoped for something pleasantly tender in response. Oh, men, if you want to say something to a woman, better write. In messages, every woman can see what she wants to see if she wants to, for example, in commas, periods, spaces or ellipses, or even in their absence, as well as in the absence of the messages. If you call her, the result may be completely unpredictable. The man who was not suddenly called me and said the following. His fingers were tired of typing messages for me. That someone else's magic wand was nothing. It turned out that he had bought a magic ring to me, which, having forgotten to gift me last time, just as happily gave to someone else. He did not have his own photo, because he did not appear in them. He did not see me as anything, thought nothing about me and did not care at all whether I had demons inside or not. He did not care if I went with him to that haunted place, and even perhaps, I would do the right thing going to the library and not to the haunted place, because according to his own experience, which he was ready to share with me, amazing encounters with people of the opposite sex sometimes took place exactly in libraries. Then he dictated the address of the basement. I was about to exclaim bravo, but kept silent, since he would not appreciate it. I remembered the phrase of a great woman, if you need to explain something, there is no need any more to explain anything. I was often invited to cast spells, but most of all I liked reading to children. Children are such small people who have not yet acquired a shell. Light predominates in them, so they feel another reality. A little and very vulnerable girl who has no shell still lives inside me. When I cast spells to children, no matter how old they are, they look not at me, my appearance, clothes, but through and see that little girl who is close and understandable to them. Children are fond of asking questions. Their questions are much smarter, deeper and more interesting than adults' questions, so I like answering them. Many children write too, but often secretly, because they are afraid of being hurt, because they have no shell yet. I tell them the story of the beginning of my path. I was 10 years old when suddenly and in large quantities I began to write both poetry and stories. It was not that my mother did not want me to become a spellcaster. She was categorically against it, being very scared that if I did not give up such activity, a hard destiny awaited me, like all those who cast. Mom gave me examples of the great spellcasters of the Silver Age. Poverty, unhappy love, loneliness, death of their loved ones and, in conclusion, their own, and tragic. I was offended and tore my notebook, but half an hour later I collected the small pieces and glued them together with adhesive tape. Mom did not talk to me for a long time, but she secretly took my creations to her office and read them to her employees. Since then I have been writing something down almost constantly. Without setting a goal to get on the list of officially recognized spellcasters, I followed the dictates of the soul, step by step approaching the day when some of my works were published in the White Book, as Nonna predicted, and 6 months later I was accepted into the most important society of spellcasters of our kingdom. Mom, are you proud of me? We met, me and the man who was not, and headed to the haunted basement. I did not feel like reading, I wanted to stay close to him. However, as soon as we went inside, he grabbed me like a kitten by the scruff of the neck and threw me onto the stage saying, "You are a spellcaster, and not you, so cast." All people who say that they write poetry are divided into poets and spellcasters. Poets write poetry, they write and exactly poems. Poems can be good or not so good, with a beautiful or terrible rhyme, or without it at all. Even where there is no need for its absence, poems can be kept in a strict rhythm, or they can limp. All poets want to write poetry. Many people first retire to a proper place, take a notebook, a pen, sit in a chair and decide to write something. Some write with difficulty, being exhausted by every line or even word, in their opinion, such is the fate of a real poet. Others write, without straining at all, about everything in a row, not missing anything that comes under their feet and in their hands, happens in front of their eyes and even behind their backs, because they believe that the amount of writing will make them spellcasters. Spellcasters, as a rule, write down or record poetry, and often, unlike poets, they don't feel like writing at all. They feel a surge of vibrations in a certain rhythm, the soul starts vibrating to the beat, and the words fall on their heads like an avalanche, sometimes at the wrong time, in the wrong place, when there is nowhere and nothing with to record them. For example, at night, when you are almost asleep, or in the snow or pouring rain outside, or while you are driving and crossing space at a high speed. Poems torment the spellcaster until he deigns to give up everything to record them on an earthly data storage, or they get offended and leave, never returning. Sometimes they dictate too quickly, and one never knows what's next, but there is no time to think, just to write everything down maybe, and only rereading, one delves into the meanings. They don't always dictate clearly, or rather, it's not always audible, so after the dictation, in some places the spellcaster begins to rack the brains. Sometimes they prompt you how it should sound in the original, sometimes not. Sometimes you don't know exactly the meaning of the dictated words, and you have to consult a dictionary to make sure that such word is appropriate in the context. However, it never happened in my practice that a word turned out to be inappropriate. Once I had to get the gospel to clarify the description of a historical event, I read about it in all 4 gospels in turn. When you read each of them from beginning to end, you don't notice the difference in the description, but reading the same event described by all the evangelists, you see it quite clearly. As a result, I had to replace 2 lines, since they touched on the place where the texts of the Gospels diverged. It's surprising that, on the one hand, the verses come from above, and on the other hand, all of them, with some exceptions, are a reflection of yourself, your thoughts, feelings, of what is happening to you in the earthly reality. The spellcaster's poems always carry meaning, but they are as laconic as possible to convey it. Like the poet's poems, spells can have rhyme or do without it. The works of the spellcasters carry the very vibrations that permeated the soul at the time of their recording, therefore, being read aloud to other people, they produce the effect of a spell. Listeners are immersed in that very state of the soul when the flow captures and takes you to the single primary source. Consciousness turns off and gives you the opportunity to feel another reality around you and inside. Ordinary poets don't connect to the flow, therefore their works don't possess such heavenly power, they are earthly. Of course, spellcasters have also ordinary poems. Anyhow, quantity means absolutely nothing for spellcasters. There are periods when spellcasters don't write anything down for years. The poems stop knocking on the invisible door, or they knock, but the spellcasters don't open it for some reasons known only to them. Some people believe that spellcasters should write poetry from childhood. However, everyone starts writing at different age, and the quantity of years one writes does not say anything at all. Everyone's soul grows at its own pace. Many people think that they need to enter special institutes to learn to write good. You can learn to write perfect poetry, it's impossible to learn to write spells. They are written in another reality, its great power is present in them. Only the one to whom it provided the key to the lock of the invisible door can become a spellcaster. Poems always belong to the earthly reality, as well as the poets themselves. However, There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I stood on a stage blinded by the light in the black basement. Yes, I am a spellcaster and do magic, white magic, the magic of the word. Every time I read, people looked at me as if I were a miracle, enjoying the flow of energies pouring into space, which I passed through myself and gave to them. They plunged into the lakes of another reality and returning, did not remember what exactly I had read and in what sequence, but they talked about the magical state they had been during my reading, their kind words used to warm me in return. However, there was a hungry flock of greedy vampires gathered in the black basement. I put my soul into my words, I loved. He said I should take it as a game with the soul. Returning home by metro, completely exhausted by vampires, I suddenly felt a colossal flow of energy beating to both palms, good energy. I knew it as well as the opposite negative one, which once used to enter me through my heels. Anyhow, I scanned the people opposite me and redirected the flow to the one who needed the energy much more. I called Maria in Italy. Her abilities manifested themselves in early childhood. She showed the place where her mother would be buried in a year, although there was no cemetery there yet. After her mother's death, Maria lived with the aunt, was often sick, more there than here. When the war began, the girl left for Italy. Her personal life left much to be desired, but as she once told me, it's always difficult to find someone who is stronger than you, but even more difficult if you can see. Maria saw everything that had happened to me lately, including specific dates and the appearance of people she had never seen, and the atmosphere of places she had never been, and ended our conversation, saying, "He was sent to you from heavens to let you go your own path, pray to our saint." At home, I have a collection of Orthodox icons brought from holy places scattered around the world. There is an icon with the saint. I knew nothing about at the time of purchasing, but I was drawn to her. A few years later, I learned from Maria that she was the saint protecting children with extrasensory abilities. That evening I turned to her for help. At night I found myself in an intermediate dimension, from which one could pass to the world of the dead. I realized that I was sleeping, and it was a dream. It's better not just to become conscious in dreams, but to take something from the earthly reality into the dream. The strongest ones know to take something out of the dream. I am pulling out only texts for now, but once I took a ring into my dream, I have never parted with it since then. An unfamiliar man and girl came up to me and said that I had to get the moonstone from the bottom of the lake. Why me and why moonstone? Anyhow, I obediently moved to the shore. The bottom was invisible. The water was dark and does not move, lake with dead water, lake of death. My teacher says that the moon is dead too. I lay down on the water surface without closing my eyes. Too deep, I would drown, having not enough breath. You can do it, the girl encouraged me. Everything is different here. You can breathe underwater or not breathe at all. I stepped into the lake, concentrated and went to the bottom, breathing. At the bottom, there was a huge shell with an irregularly shaped moonstone, illuminating the lake from the inside with a ghostly glow. I pulled the stone ashore. What for?